question that put Bronny under the brightest spotlight. The most uncomfortable question in Los Angeles is no longer about LeBron James's next move. It is about what happens to Bronny James the second LeBron is no longer standing beside him. Because ESPN did not just ask a normal basketball question, they said the quiet part out loud on national television. Can Bronny James actually stay in the NBA if LeBron James leaves the Lakers? And the moment that question hit the air, it changed the entire conversation around the Lakers, Bronny, and the future of one of basketball's most famous families. Nobody is asking that about Austin Reeves. Nobody is asking that about the other young players trying to earn minutes. Nobody is asking whether they can survive without LeBron's shadow protecting them. But with Bronny, the question feels different, heavier, and much more personal, and that is why this story has exploded. To be fair, this is not about attacking Bronny. He has shown discipline. He has worked. He has taken criticism that most young players never have to face. He has tried to grow inside a spotlight that never turns off. But the problem is simple. In the NBA, effort earns respect, but performance earns security. And right now, Bronny is trapped between two realities. One reality says he is a young second-round pick still developing, still learning, still trying to become a reliable NBA role player. The other reality says his last name opened doors faster than his game did. Both things can be true at the same time, and that is what makes this situation so intense. The Lakers know it, ESPN knows it, NBA fans know it, and deep down, Bronny probably knows it too. If LeBron stays in Los Angeles, Bronny gets more time, more protection, and more space to develop. But if LeBron leaves, retires, or loses influence inside the Lakers organization, everything changes overnight. Suddenly, every minute Bronny plays, every shot he takes, every defensive mistake, and every quiet night becomes evidence in a much bigger trial. Does he belong because of his own game, or is he still in the league because of the greatest player of his generation? That is the question hanging over this entire story. Before we go deeper, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments. If you believe Bronny can build a real NBA career on his own, comment 1. If you think LeBron's presence is still the biggest reason he has this opportunity, comment 2. And make sure you subscribe, because this Lakers story is only getting more dramatic from here. ESPN said what everyone was thinking. What made the ESPN conversation so powerful was not that anybody attacked Bronny James. Nobody on that panel had to raise their voice. Nobody had to insult him. Nobody had to turn the segment into one of those loud sports TV arguments where people chase attention by tearing a young player down. The tone was actually calm, almost careful, and somehow that made it even more uncomfortable. Because when a serious basketball conversation starts with the question of whether Bronny can keep his place in the NBA without LeBron beside him, the silence around that question becomes louder than any hot take. The panel gave Bronny credit. They acknowledged that he has worked. They talked about his progress. They pointed out that playoff minutes are not charity minutes. Coaches do not just hand postseason possessions to a player because his father is famous. Even late game opportunities in the playoffs come with trust. You have to know the system. You have to defend. You have to be prepared. You have to show the staff that the moment will not completely overwhelm you. That matters. But then came the part nobody could ignore. If Bronny wants this to become a real NBA career, he has to prove that his value exists outside of LeBron's presence. That is the line that changed the temperature of the entire discussion, because it was not cruel. It was not unfair. It was the exact challenge sitting in front of him. Bronny is not just trying to beat defenders. He is trying to beat perception. Every young player in the NBA is fighting for minutes, but Bronny is fighting for something deeper. He is fighting for the right to be discussed as himself, not as LeBron's son, not as a Lakers storyline, not as a historic father-son moment, not as a marketing headline, as himself. And that is harder than people realize. Because once the public decides a player only got through the door because of his name, every mistake becomes proof. A missed 3 is not just a missed 3. A bad defensive possession is not just a bad defensive possession. A quiet game is not just a young player struggling. It becomes evidence in a debate that never stopped. That is the burden Bronny carries every time he checks in. The shadow that follows every possession. The hardest part about Bronny James' situation is that the conversation is never only about basketball. If another second-round pick spends time in the G League, fans call it development. If another young guard struggles to find a consistent role, people say he needs patience. If another player needs 2 or 3 seasons to grow into a rotation piece, nobody turns it into a national debate. But Bronny does not get that kind of silence. Every minute he plays becomes a headline, every stat line gets pulled apart, every clip travels across social media, every time the Lakers make a roster move, people ask what it means for him. And every time LeBron's future becomes uncertain, Bronny's future gets dragged into the same storm. That is the strange price of being connected to greatness. LeBron's name opened doors, but it also built walls. It gave Bronny visibility that most prospects could only dream of, but it also took away the one thing most young players desperately need: space to fail quietly. And young players have to fail. They miss shots, they make late rotations, they hesitate, they overthink, they get bumped off their spots, they learn how fast the NBA really is. That is normal. But when Bronny goes through those normal growing pains, the reaction is never normal. Some people defend him no matter what because they respect LeBron. Some people criticize him harder because they think he skipped the line. And somewhere in the middle is Bronny himself, trying to become a professional basketball player while everyone argues about why he is there. That is what makes this story so human. Because behind all the debate is a young guard trying to build a career under pressure most players never experience. He did not choose to be compared to one of the greatest players ever every single night. He did not choose for his development to become a referendum on power, influence, family, and the Lakers organization. But that is where he is. And the only way out is performance. Not sympathy, not headlines, not name recognition, not history. Bronny has to create moments that belong only to him. He has to stack possessions, defend with purpose, shoot without fear, and make coaches believe he can help them win. That is how the shadow starts to shrink. One possession at a time, the Lakers are stuck in a complicated game. For the Lakers, this is not as simple as keeping or cutting a young player. This is the kind of decision that touches everything: basketball, business, loyalty, reputation, locker room trust, and the relationship with LeBron James. That is why the Bronny conversation feels bigger than his role on the court. In a normal situation, a second-round pick on an affordable contract would not create this much noise. A team would develop him, evaluate him, and make a practical decision. But the Lakers are not operating in a normal situation. They are the Lakers. Every choice becomes national news. Every rumor becomes a debate. Every relationship with a superstar matters. And when the player involved is LeBron's son, the front office cannot pretend the decision exists in a vacuum. If they keep Bronny, people will ask whether it is because they believe in his development or because they want to keep peace with LeBron. If they move on from him, people will ask whether that signals a deeper shift in the Lakers' relationship with the James family. Either way, the decision will be interpreted as a message. That is a difficult place for a franchise to stand. The contract itself is not the problem. Bronny is not on some massive deal that crushes flexibility. For NBA standards, his salary is manageable, and that gives Los Angeles a practical reason to keep investing in him. Young players with work ethic, defensive tools, and shooting potential are worth patience, especially when the financial risk is low. But the roster direction creates another question. The Lakers are trying to build a team that fits a modern style. They need size, they need shooting, they need versatile defenders, they need players who can survive playoff matchups and complement stars without needing the ball every possession. That kind of roster construction is not forgiving to guards who are still trying to prove they can consistently impact winning. That is where Bronny's challenge becomes real. He cannot just be a story, he has to become a fit. The Lakers can protect him for only so long. The NBA eventually forces every organization to choose between sentiment and production, and if Los Angeles wants to chase championships, every roster spot matters. Even the famous ones. The fit problem nobody can ignore. Bronny James' path to a real NBA role is not impossible, but it is narrow. That is the part of this conversation fans sometimes miss. The question is not whether Bronny can play basketball. Of course he can. You do not reach this level without discipline, talent, and years of work. The real question is whether he can become the kind of player an NBA coach trusts when the game is tight, the matchup is brutal, and every possession has consequences. For a guard his size, the margin for error is small. At 6'2", Bronny has to bring something that forces teams to keep him on the floor. Smaller guards survive in the NBA when they are elite shooters, elite creators, elite defenders, or relentless energy players who change the pace of a game. If you are not big, you have to be undeniable in another area. That is the mountain in front of him. The Lakers' current roster direction makes that mountain even steeper. They are looking for length, switchability, three-point shooting, and players who can fit around stars without becoming defensive targets. In today's NBA, wings are currency. Size matters. Versatility matters. Coaches want players who can guard multiple positions, rotate fast, hit open threes, and stay playable in the postseason. Bronny is still trying to prove he can be that. His shooting has shown signs of progress, and that is important. A guard who can defend and hit open threes has a pathway, but percentages are only part of the story. The willingness to shoot matters just as much. If defenders sense hesitation, they will sag off. If they do not respect the jumper, spacing gets tighter. And when spacing gets tight, stars have less room to operate. That is why confidence becomes a skill. Bronny cannot play like he is trying not to make mistakes. He has to play like he belongs. He has to take the open shot. He has to pressure the ball. He has to turn defense into offense. He has to make simple plays quickly and avoid becoming the possession that opponents hunt. That does not mean he needs to become a star. It means he needs a clear identity. Because in the NBA, young players without identity disappear fast. The part of Bronny's story people forget. The public debate around Bronny James often skips the most important part. He is still developing. That sounds obvious, but it matters. Bronny was not a lottery pick brought in to save a franchise. He was not drafted to become the face of the Lakers. He was selected late in the second round, the part of the draft where most players have to fight just to stay visible. Many players picked in that range never become regular rotation pieces. Some never get real NBA minutes at all. So if Bronny were any other player, the expectations would be completely different. People would talk about patience. They would talk about reps. They would talk about strength, confidence, G League development, and learning how to adjust to NBA speed. They would not expect a finished product. They would not treat every quiet night like a verdict. But because his name is James, the timeline changed. Bronny has been watched like a star while trying to develop like a project. That combination is almost unfair. He receives attention like a franchise player, but has the role of someone still trying to earn trust. That gap creates the tension. People expect proof before the process is complete. And that pressure did not begin in Los Angeles. It followed him before the draft. It followed him through college. It followed him every time cameras found him on the bench. Every time analysts debated his future. Every time fans compared him to a standard he never claimed for himself. Few young athletes enter professional sports with that much noise already attached to their name. Still, there have been real signs of progress. He has spent time in the G League getting the kind of reps young players need. He has been around NBA veterans. He has experienced the speed of the league. He has learned the demands of a Lakers market, which is not a normal environment for development. And even with all the outside pressure, the reports about his approach have usually pointed in the same direction. Grounded, hardworking, focused. That matters because development is not just skill. It is character under pressure. Bronny's story is not finished, but the patience around him may be running faster than his development curve. And that is the dangerous part. The NBA can wait on talent, but only if teams believe the growth is real. Now, Bronny has to make that belief stronger. Progress is real, but the questions are real too. This is where the Bronny James conversation has to become honest. He has improved, but he has not answered everything. Both statements can be true. And if this story is going to be fair, it cannot swing all the way in one direction. It cannot pretend Bronny is only in the league because of LeBron. But it also cannot pretend his place is completely secure based on production alone. The truth sits in the middle, and that is what makes the debate so intense. The progress is easy to see in flashes. He has looked more comfortable as a shooter. He has shown moments where the ball moves cleanly out of his hands. He has displayed the kind of effort coaches appreciate. He can pressure the ball, compete defensively, and play with energy. Those are real traits. And for a young guard trying to earn a role, they matter. But the concerns do not disappear because of flashes. Consistency is the next step. In the NBA, flashes get you noticed, but consistency gets you minutes. A coach has to know what he is getting every night. Can Bronny hit open shots without hesitating? Can he defend without fouling? Can he handle bigger guards trying to overpower him? Can he stay ready when he only touches the ball a few times? Can he impact a game even when the offense is not designed for him? Those are the questions that decide career. His size also means opponents will test him. That is not personal. That is scouting. If a team sees a smaller guard on the floor, they are going to force switches, attack matchups, and see whether he can survive physically. Bronny has to show that he can absorb that pressure and still make winning plays. That is why his future depends on role clarity. If he becomes a defensive guard who hits enough threes, pushes tempo, and avoids mistakes, there is a path. If he becomes hesitant, undersized, and inconsistent, the path gets much harder. The NBA does not require every player to be a star, but it does require every player to provide value. Bronny's challenge is no longer about making history with his father. That moment already happened. Now the challenge is building a career after the history fades. LeBron's decision changes everything. No matter how much people try to separate the stories, LeBron James still controls the temperature around Bronny's future. That is the reality. If LeBron stays with the Lakers, Bronny gets more time inside a familiar environment. The organization can continue developing him. The media noise may cool down slightly, and the father-son connection remains part of the Lakers' identity. There would still be pressure, but at least the structure would be stable. But if LeBron leaves, everything becomes uncertain. Suddenly, Bronny is no longer just a young player developing in Los Angeles. He becomes part of a much bigger question about what the Lakers are trying to be. Are they still protecting a relationship with LeBron? Are they moving fully into a new era? Are they building around different stars, different priorities, and a different style of basketball? That is when Bronny's roster spot would be viewed differently. Not necessarily because the Lakers want to move on from him, but because the context around him would change. Without LeBron, every decision becomes more basketball specific. Every roster spot gets judged more sharply. Every young player has to fit the direction of the team. And then there is the possibility that LeBron signs somewhere else. That would create an even stranger conversation. Would another team want Bronny too? Would the Lakers consider moving him if it helped maintain goodwill? Would Bronny want a fresh start? Or would following LeBron make it even harder for people to see him as independent? That is the uncomfortable contradiction. The thing that made the father-son story beautiful could also make Bronny's individual identity harder to build. If he stays close to LeBron forever, people will keep questioning whether he is standing on his own. But if he separates from LeBron too soon, he faces the hardest test of his career before he may be fully ready. There is no clean path, and retirement may be the biggest twist of all. Whenever LeBron finally walks away, the shield disappears completely. Bronny's name will still be famous, but the protection will be gone. At that point, he will be judged like every other player fighting for a place in the league. That day is coming. The only mystery is whether Bronny will be ready when it arrives. The 3 endings. Waiting for Bronny. There are really 3 possible endings to this chapter of Bronny James' story. The first ending is stability. LeBron stays in Los Angeles. The Lakers keep Bronny, and the organization gives him another season to grow. This is the least dramatic outcome, but it might be the best basketball situation for him. He would have time. He would have familiar coaches. He would understand the system. He could keep working in the G League when needed and continue fighting for minutes without his entire career being reset overnight. But even that ending comes with pressure, because if Bronny stays, improvement cannot be invisible. The Lakers need to see a stronger shooter, a more confident decision maker, and a guard who can defend with enough consistency to earn trust. Another year of development only matters if it creates progress people can actually see. The second ending is a move. If LeBron leaves, trade rumors around Bronny could get louder. Some people would love the idea of keeping the father-son story together somewhere else, but that would create another problem. If Bronny follows LeBron to a new team, the independence question becomes even louder. Fans would not see separation. They would see the same connection continuing in a different jersey. That might help him emotionally, but it may hurt the way people view his career. A new team could also mean a fresh chance, but fresh chances come with fewer excuses. Another franchise may not feel the same pressure to protect the story. Another coach may look at Bronny more coldly, more practically, and ask one simple question: can he help us win? The third ending is the hardest one. LeBron retires, and Bronny has to stand alone. No shared roster story, no father-son headline, no historic connection driving the conversation every night. Just Bronny, his work, his minutes, his defense, his shooting, and his ability to earn a place in the league. That might sound scary, but it could also be the best thing for him long term. Because eventually, every player needs a career that belongs to him. Bronny cannot live forever inside LeBron's legacy. He has to build his own evidence, his own trust, and his own identity. And maybe that is the real point of this entire debate. The question is not whether Bronny can escape LeBron's shadow immediately. The question is whether he can grow strong enough to stand in the light by himself. The real test begins when the name is not enough. At the end of all the noise, all the debates, and all the uncomfortable television segments, the truth is simple. Bronny James does not need to become LeBron James. That was never a fair standard. It was never realistic. It was never the right way to judge him. LeBron is one of the greatest players basketball has ever seen. Expecting his son to carry the same weight would be unfair to almost anyone. Bronny's real path is not superstardom. It is usefulness. It is reliability. It is becoming the kind of player a coach can trust for defense, energy, smart decisions, and enough shooting to keep the floor balanced. That kind of career is valuable. Not every NBA player has to be a franchise face. Championship teams need role players who do the hard things. They need guards who fight over screens. They need players who stay ready. They need teammates who accept limited touches, make the extra pass, and compete even when the spotlight is somewhere else. That is the path Bronny has to chase. But here is the lesson. Opportunity can open the door, but only performance keeps it open. LeBron's influence may have helped Bronny reach this moment. His last name may have created attention, access, and chances most players never receive. But none of that can defend a pick and roll. None of that can make an open three. None of that can earn a rotation spot when a coach is trying to win a playoff game. The game eventually tells the truth. That does not mean fans should tear Bronny down. He is a young player trying to grow under a level of pressure most people cannot imagine. He deserves fair criticism, not personal attacks. He deserves patience, but not special protection forever. He deserves the chance to prove himself, but he also has to understand that proof is the only thing the NBA respects in the end. For the Lakers, the strategy is delicate. They must balance loyalty with team building. They must respect LeBron's legacy without letting emotion control roster decisions. They must help Bronny develop without turning his career into a permanent side story. For Bronny, the mission is clear. Shoot with confidence, defend with pride, play with force, build trust, accept the grind, create a role that does not depend on anyone else's name. Because when LeBron eventually walks away, the world will stop asking what Bronny is next to his father and start asking what Bronny is by himself. That will be the real beginning. If you believe Bronny can build a long NBA career on his own, comment 1. If you think the biggest challenge is still ahead, comment 2. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan because this Lakers story is far from over.